My name is Daniel Moore. I'm 31 years old, and on August 12, 2015, I died in the middle of the North Atlantic when our ship went down. I wasn't a soldier, not a fisherman, not even a seasoned sailor. I was a mechanical engineer contracted for a cargo vessel making its way from Boston to Lisbon. I had always loved machines, gears, and engines, the beautiful logic of things that worked if you treated them right. At sea, the engines were my responsibility, the heartbeat of the ship. We carried crates of industrial equipment, hundreds of tons, stacked and secured like a floating city. I grew up far from any ocean. My hometown in Kansas was endless wheat fields and summer dust storms, not salt spray and steel hulls. I didn't see the ocean until I was 19, standing on a pier in Virginia, staring at something so wide it looked like it could swallow the world. Back then, the sea felt like freedom. Years later, it felt like home. We left Boston under a gray sky, the kind sailors called uneasy weather. By the second night, winds had begun to rise. Waves started slamming the hull hard enough to rattle the tools in my workshop. It was supposed to be just another Atlantic squall, something the captain had weathered dozens of times. But by the fourth night, the storm had turned into something else entirely. I was in the engine room when the alarms went off. It wasn't just the howling wind anymore. It was the deep, awful groan of steel under strain. The radio crackled with the captain's voice, clipped and sharp. Brace for impact, wave cresting starboard. I barely had time to grab a rail before the ship rolled so hard that wrenches clattered across the deck like dice on a table. Then came the sound no engineer ever wants to hear, a shattering snap from somewhere deep in the ship's spine. I knew instantly that something critical had given way. The lights flickered, then went out entirely. Emergency lamps bathed everything in a dim red glow. Seawater poured in through vents that had never failed before. We fought to stabilize the systems, but nature didn't care about our efforts. Another wave struck, bigger than the first, lifting the stern high before slamming us down again. Cargo shifted violently. I could hear the massive crates tearing free, smashing into the walls. Someone yelled, "She's breaking apart!" But the roar of the ocean swallowed the words. I remember scrambling up the ladder toward the deck, my hands slick with oil and seawater. The cold wind hit like a wall when I emerged into the open, rain lashing my face so hard it stung. The horizon was gone, just black water and walls of foam. The lifeboats were already being lowered, crew members shouting over the chaos. But before I could reach them, another monstrous wave rose above us, higher than the ship's bridge. I grabbed the nearest railing and held on with everything I had. The wave hit. The world went weightless. And then, silence. I was no longer clinging to steel. I wasn't even in the water. I was above it, looking down at the ship breaking apart, watching tiny orange lifeboats bob among the debris. And there, far below, I saw my own body, limp and unmoving, carried away by the dark sea. From above, the storm looked different. Less chaotic, more like a living thing with a will of its own. I could see the curling mass of waves stretching for miles, their peaks lit by flashes of lightning, their valleys sinking into deep, cold shadows. The strange part was the silence. I could see the crew shouting, see the spray exploding against the lifeboats, but I couldn't hear any of it. It was like someone had taken the world and turned the volume all the way down. That's when I realized I was no longer part of it. My body was still down there in the ocean, but I wasn't. I drifted higher, carried by something I couldn't see. It wasn't wind, and it wasn't the pull of gravity. It was more like the quiet current that tugs at you underwater, gentle, but impossible to resist. My fear should have been overwhelming, but instead, I felt strangely calm, like a deep breath after holding it too long. It was in that suspended moment, looking down at the fractured ship, that I thought of my father. He'd been gone for nearly a decade, but I remembered him teaching me how to fix the family's old lawn mower in our Kansas garage. "Engines are honest," he used to say. "If something's wrong, they'll tell you, if you know how to listen." I wondered if life was like that too. Maybe the signs had been there all along, and I just hadn't listened. I floated higher, away from the storm, away from the cold. The blackness of the ocean gave way to a soft gray light, not from any sun I recognized. The air, if you could call it that, felt weightless and warm. I tried to look for the horizon, but it was gone. There was no sea, no sky, just endless, still space. And then, out of that space, came something else. It began as a glow in the distance, faint but steady. Not the jagged light of lightning, but the warm, living kind you see in a fireplace on a winter night. I felt drawn toward it instantly. The pull was stronger now, not just carrying me but calling me. My mind drifted to moments from my life, sharp and sudden. The smell of coffee in the ship's galley. The laughter of my niece when I visited home. The tired but proud look on my mother's face the day I graduated. These memories weren't just playing in my head, they were alive around me, as if I could reach out and step into them. But the glow ahead kept growing, and the memories faded into its light. I became aware of a figure standing within that glow, but I couldn't make out details at first. All I saw was that the light didn't just shine around him, it seemed to come from him. As I drew closer, the shape became clearer. A man, tall but not imposing, clothed in something simple, with eyes that caught every trace of light and held it. I didn't need to ask who he was. I knew. Jesus. The sight of him stopped everything inside me. Not just my thoughts, but the restless hum I hadn't even known I carried. His presence was peace itself, but not the kind you feel when trouble is far away. This was peace that could stand in the middle of a storm and never be moved. He stepped toward me, and the closer he came, the more the weight I didn't realize I'd been dragging fell away. I could see my entire life in his eyes, not just the events, but the truth behind them. The motives, the fears, the moments I had hidden from everyone, even from myself. And yet, there was no accusation there, only understanding. "Daniel," he said. My name in his voice sounded like it had always belonged to him. I tried to speak, but my voice caught somewhere between my heart and my mouth. "You've been building your life like an engine," he continued, "measuring worth in what works and what doesn't. But not everything is meant to be fixed with tools." I wanted to tell him I didn't understand, but deep down I did. I thought of every problem I had tried to solve by tightening bolts and turning wrenches, even the ones in my relationships in my own heart. "There's something I need to show you," he said, and the light around us shifted. The stillness began to move, forming into a kind of vast open plain. But it wasn't made of grass or stone. It was made of light itself, stretching farther than I could see. And at the far edges of that plain, darkness stirred, moving like smoke across water. "What is that?" I asked, my voice small against the enormity before me. His eyes grew serious. "It is what is spreading across the hearts of many. Fear, division, the belief that they are alone. But you are not here to fear it, you are here to understand." And as he spoke, the scene began to change again. The plane of light beneath my feet pulsed faintly, as if it were alive. The darkness on the horizon rolled in slow waves, shifting like ink clouds underwater. It wasn't random. It moved with intent, reaching tendrils inward toward the brightness where we stood. Jesus raised his hand, and the light around us brightened, forcing the darkness to retreat. "Everything you see here," he said, "reflects what is happening on the earth. The light is love, truth, and the prayers of those who still trust me. The darkness is every lie, every fear, every chain the enemy has laid on the human heart. I swallowed hard. "It's everywhere," I said quietly. "It is spreading," he replied. "But it does not spread without permission." Hearts must open to it, sometimes through pride, sometimes through despair. And once it enters, it seeks to cloud everything. He motioned for me to look closer. The scene shifted, and suddenly I was looking down at the earth itself. Cities glowed faintly with pinpricks of light, but around them swirled vast shadows. In some places, the light was bright and clustered, and the darkness stayed back. In others, the glow was dim, scattered, and the shadows pressed in until they swallowed entire streets. "What's happening in those places?" I asked. "People have forgotten they are loved," Jesus said. "They think they must earn it. They think they are alone. They've replaced truth with the noise of their own making, and in that noise, my voice is lost to them." I thought of my own life, how I had thrown myself into work, how I measured my value by the hours I spent fixing problems. How many years had I drowned out his voice without even realizing it? He stepped closer, and for a moment, his eyes locked on mine with a depth I could barely hold. "Daniel, this darkness will grow bolder. It will use storms, wars, and the shaking of nations to root itself deeper. But there is hope. I want you to see it." The view shifted again. Across the darkened landscape, I saw small groups of people, some gathered in homes, others kneeling in empty fields, others alone in quiet rooms. Every time they prayed, a burst of golden light rose from them, threading across the world like strands of sunlight. When enough of these strands touched, the darkness between them shrank back. "These are those who still believe," he said, "and their prayers carry more power than they know. One prayer in faith can hold back destruction. Many prayers together can change the course of nations." I stared at the spreading network of light, stunned. "You will carry this message," Jesus said. "But first, you must understand more." The plane of light rippled, and we began to move, not walking, not flying, but simply being in another place. We stopped in a place that wasn't the plane of light anymore. It was more like standing in a vast, open sky where the ground and horizon had dissolved. Around us floated fragments of scenes, pieces of my own life. The first image was my mother's kitchen back in Kansas. I saw myself as a boy, maybe 10, sitting at the table with a broken radio in front of me. My father was showing me how to take it apart, his voice steady and patient. I could almost hear the smell of coffee and old wood, feel the sunlight on the counter. "This," Jesus said, "is where you first learned to create and repair. But it was also where you first began to believe that being useful was the same as being loved." I winced at the truth in his words. My father had loved me deeply, but I'd always noticed how proud he looked when I fixed something. I had chased that look for years, in every job, every relationship. Another scene appeared, me at 23, turning down a family trip so I could work overtime repairing a turbine in a plant. I told myself it was for the money, but deep down, I knew it was also because I didn't know how to just be with people without doing something for them. "Love is not earned by what you can do," Jesus said. "It is given because of who you are." I turned to answer him, but the scene shifted again, this time to a moment I tried to forget. I was 30, sitting alone in my apartment after a falling out with one of my closest friends. I had been too stubborn to apologize, convinced that admitting fault would make me look weak. "Pride builds walls faster than any enemy," he said. "And those walls keep out not just others, but me." My throat tightened. I wanted to look away, but he didn't let me. "Daniel, you have carried the belief that if you stopped proving yourself, people would leave you. But I have never left you, not in your silence, not in your storms." The fragments around us faded, and once again, I stood on the glowing plain. But this time, it wasn't empty. Figures began to appear at the edges, faces I didn't know, people from places I'd never been. They were watching me. Why are they here? I asked. They are the ones who will hear your voice when you speak, Jesus said. Some will listen because they know your story. Others will listen because my Spirit will make them hear. But they must know the truth, that no darkness is greater than my light. I looked at him, and my heart knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. This was not just for me. What I was being shown was for them, too. He gestured to the horizon, where the light met the darkness. There is more you must see before you return. The horizon darkened, and I realized we were no longer standing still. The plane of light beneath us carried us forward, straight toward the shifting wall of shadow. It wasn't just a haze now. It was alive, writhing, reaching out with fingers of smoke. Jesus lifted his hand, and the darkness pulled back just enough for me to see through it. Images formed, not memories, but scenes I had never witnessed. In one, I saw a great city with streets flooded not by water, but by unrest. Crowds shouted in anger, their faces twisted, their words like sparks feeding a fire. The glow over that city was faint, almost gone, and the darkness pressed close, feeding on division. In another, I saw a small town struck by disaster. Buildings collapsed, people wandering in shock. But here, the glow was brighter. I saw neighbors helping strangers, hands clasped in prayer under the open sky. The darkness recoiled every time their voices rose together. I turned to him. So it's not the size of the place, but the strength of the light? He nodded. It is not the size of the crowd that matters, but the depth of their faith. Where even 2 or 3 agree in my name, darkness cannot stand. The vision shifted again. This time, I saw my own country from above. Lines of light crisscrossed it like golden threads, but there were gaps, large, empty stretches where the glow was thin. And in those gaps, shadows pooled and spread. What happens if the gaps close completely? I asked. His voice was solemn. Then the shadow moves freely. But if the light strengthens, even the smallest thread can hold back a tide. I looked down at my hands. What can one person do against all that? One person with faith can do more than 1,000 without it, he said. And one voice speaking truth can awaken many. The plane slowed, and the visions faded. We stood again in the warm glow, but I could feel something shifting, like the end of this journey was drawing nearer. There is one more thing you must see before you return, he said. The light dimmed, and we stood before a narrow path cutting through the shadow. On one side, people walked with heads bowed, carrying heavy chains they couldn't see. Their eyes were dull, their steps slow. This is what happens when hearts close, Jesus said softly. They stopped looking for me. The chains feel familiar, so they wear them as if they belong. On the other side of the path, I saw others drop their chains and turn toward the light. Their steps quickened, their faces lifted. The glow around them grew until the darkness couldn't follow. Every choice matters, he continued. Every prayer is a key. Even the smallest turning toward me sends ripples farther than you know. I swallowed hard. And if they never turn? He looked at me with deep sorrow. Then the chains remain. But you will tell them they have a choice. The path ahead brightened, pulling us forward. I felt it. My time here was nearly over. The horizon opened like a book, each page a living scene. I saw hospital rooms at midnight where someone whispered a trembling prayer, and a soft gold ring spread through the walls like dawn. I saw a commuter train, faces tired, distant, until one woman closed her eyes, breathed a single help, and a thread of light leapt to a stranger across the aisle who hadn't prayed in years. In a workshop much like mine, a man dropped his tools, pressed grease-stained hands together, and the very air brightened. Jesus stood beside me, steady and near. This is how the kingdom moves, he said. Quiet, faithful steps. not spectacle, but steady love. Not noise, but truth carried on honest lips. The images sharpened, families forgiving old wounds, neighbors sharing bread after a storm, a small church singing when power failed and candles turned the dark into a sanctuary. With every act of mercy, the shadows thinned. "Daniel," he said, turning to me, "tell them I am closer than breath. Tell them they are not powerless. When they pray, heaven is not far, heaven answers." The plane brightened until it felt like standing inside a heartbeat. I knew it then. The journey was closing. "Will I remember all of this?" I asked. "You will remember enough," he said. "And what you lack, my spirit will supply." The light gathered, warm as home. "It is time," he said gently. "There is one more gift before you go." We stepped into a place unlike anything I'd seen before, a vast hall of light, its floor like liquid glass. In the center stood a table, and on it lay a book so large its cover shimmered like molten gold. "This," Jesus said, "is the record of lives, not just actions, but the heart behind them." As he opened it, I saw moments from people I'd never met. Small acts of kindness, a cup of water, a hand on a shoulder, rippling into generations. Then I saw choices made from selfishness, and the shadows they spread. "What you choose," he said, "will echo longer than you imagine. Love is never wasted, but neither is harm without consequence." The pages closed with a sound like wind in the mountains. He looked at me with steady eyes. "You still have time to choose what your echoes will be." The words sank deep, like seeds into soil. I knew they'd follow me back. The hall of light faded to a shore without water, just brightness lapping at our feet like a quiet tide. Far off, I sensed the storm where my body drifted, a dark seed inside a cold sea. The distance between here and there felt like a single breath held too long. Jesus faced me, and the nearness of him steadied everything. "Daniel, you have seen what fear builds and what love restores. Tell them I am not far. Tell them the door opens from the inside." A warmth kindled in my chest, small as a spark, clear as a bell tone. He placed his hand where the spark lived, and it became a steady flame. "This is courage," he said. "Not the absence of danger, but the presence of truth. Keep it. I don't want to lose you." I whispered. "You won't," he answered, gentle and sure. "When you choose light, you will find me already there." The brightness surged. Sound rushed back. The slam of waves, a voice calling numbers, the thud of hands on a chest. The shore of light thinned to a single gleam, like a line drawn across a night sky. "It is time," he said. The line snapped, and I fell toward the cold. The cold slammed into me like a wave, and my chest heaved without my command. A blinding light above turned into the pale gray of a hospital ceiling. Voices erupted, urgent, shaky, relieved. Someone gripped my hand hard, and through the blur I saw my brother's tear-streaked face. "You're back," he whispered. I knew where I'd been, and I knew who had sent me back. My lungs burned, my body ached, but my soul felt clean, whole. I took one slow breath and spoke, my voice raspy but certain. "Don't waste your life chasing shadows. Forgive quickly. Love deeply. And seek him while you can. He's closer than you think." That was all. I closed my eyes, not from weakness, but from peace, the kind you only find when you stood in the presence of eternal love.